Hey guys, and welcome back to another Spore creation video. And for today's creation, I'm going to be making Thunder the Night's Light from How to Train Your Dragon, The Nine Realms. Now, let me just quickly start off and say that I had a lot of trepidations about the Nine Realms, you know, given I love the Nordic Viking vibes from the original franchise. Gotta say, better than expected. I would actually recommend it. It's different, but it's good. And I particularly like Thunder, hence why I'm making Thunder right here today. So, Thunder, quite clearly a Night's Light. One of the descendants from Toothless and the Light Furies, got a lot of sass, and I really like the character in the show. And of course, I couldn't resist making him here. Plus, I've never made an adult Nightlight. I did make one or two of the hatchlings from the end of the third movie and from the Christmas special, but I never made an adult one, so this here seemed like a really good opportunity. Plus, it just means revisiting my favourite franchise once again. Now, that being said, while it might be my favourite, rebuilding just the Night Furies, or the Furies in general, has always been a bit of a challenge for me because they have such a uniquely, I'd say, soft physique, where they're not, I wouldn't really call them chubby, but especially their legs are like very round and not bulbous, but again, like soft seems like a kind of a good term for it, which unfortunately Spore is not really the greatest at, but I feel like I did a fairly decent job here. Happy with the overall posture. I did go for a particularly lean looking design since, well, I mostly reference Toothless for the majority of my references because they are more or less the same physique, minus a couple of differences such as the tail and the head, quills, ears, the little tufty bits, and you know what I'm referring to. Otherwise, it's very the same physique, and especially in the Nine Realms, Thunder does look quite a bit thinner than all the others did. So I'm not sure that's intentional or not, but either way, I tried to, you know, kind of get that in this creation here. The claws had a bit of a fun time. I was originally trying to use the Dark Injection variant of the Keratin Horn, the darker purple one, and then quickly realised that the foot I'd used was pronouncing the toes a bit too much, so I quickly snatched in a sucker feet instead, and then used the same Keratin Horns once again. That way the claws are a little bit more embedded into the hands, since, as I'm sure we've all seen, the Night and Light Furies, their hands, their claws, they don't really have toes, it's just kind of there attached, and it's a bit of an interesting thing to try and do in a Spore creation, but I feel like I did a good job of it. Now, after adding the spiky claws to the arms and the large webbed area to the base of the tail, it was then time to focus on the tail itself. Now, Thunder's tail is very unique and utterly unlike the Light Fury or the Night Fury, as it's got a bit of a strange sort of tri-sail thing going on, where it's got like three sets of fins, one down the middle and one to either side. Really interesting, took quite a few different references to try and get that one down. So it's close enough for my creation. Originally I made it too big, so I had to shrink it down after a while, but I think the overall proportions, where the spikes are and the curvature, I think it's quite alright, and you can definitely recognise it's Thunder's tail. And then once I was done with the tail, it was time to get to my most concerning feature, and that was the head, since like I mentioned earlier, Night Furies and Light Furies have always been quite tricky for me to make in Spore. The body being around, but especially the heads, and especially trying to get them to animate. Now, I really wanted this to animate, but unfortunately, Thunder has a very distinctive white lower jaw, and it's one thing to make the upper half of a head a different colour in Spore. You can't do it on the lower half because the animation completely ruins it. Even if you stack parts on the bottom of the jaw, whenever the jaw animates and opens, the parts remain rigid and static. They don't travel with the lower jaw, unfortunately, so it just meant I had to have a frozen head, which is something I actually haven't had to do for quite a while, so I guess it's not the worst. I definitely do try to make things animate more nowadays, but this is going to have to be the one exception. As for the rest of the head, well, trying to start with the rather white, round, lumpy bits of the mouth, I had to try and make everything just kind of flow in between. I just kept on adding more and more colour spheres and nail downs, and even a couple of Dark Injection recolouring parts or textureless parts to try and just get the overall shape I want. It's tricky, it's hard to describe, it's kind of banging your head against the wall until something eventually happens. And in the end, I feel like I got a pretty decent result. Thankfully, Thunder has a predominantly dark colour scheme, which means that a lot of these little flaws here and there kind of get lost in the shadows. Now, as for the little spiky ear tufts, not really sure what to call them, I'll just call it ears. As for the ears, he has particularly, not not spiky, more like curved ears compared to both the Toothless and the Light Fury, where the Light Fury had very kind of bland, nubbly bits, and Toothless had fairly pronounced bits. Thunder's clearly just a different one altogether. His ones are kind of like pointing upwards or upright. And I really like it in the show. It's really kind of cute, actually gives him a bit more personality and character. And that was something I was really keen on trying to recreate here. Again, I think I did a fairly decent job. I tried something new this time, using one of the creepy and cute parts to get all of the little, say little spiky bits on the ears. Whereas normally I'd use something very basic, like a neutrino annihilator or a nail down or a color sphere, something like small and round. This time I tried to be a bit more friendly with the budget, using the creepy and cute part meant I used less parts and got more detail out of it. I think it came out looking quite nice. Next up, I was experimenting with the colours quite early, since I knew I wanted the entire body and neck to be white, but I wasn't sure how much I'd have to patch in using colour spheres, and ideally I'd want to use as little colour spheres for the white belly as possible, because you can tell it looks different, it's got like a very different texture, whereas having like an actual paint scheme on the creature succeeding just looks 10 times better. Thankfully, I was able to get a fairly decent result. Unfortunately, the white belly and neck texture that I did use did kind of splatter all over the thighs and the arms a little bit, so it does make it look a bit messy, but Spore, what can you do? I did try patching in some of the splatter with colour spheres, but again, like I said, you can kind of just tell, and it doesn't quite look 100%. It looks pretty good, but I don't want pretty good, I want things to look really good. And I guess in this case, having a bit of a flaw, in my opinion, was better than kind of patching it up with band-aids. So once I've done with the colours and the heads, I moved on to the spikes. Thunder has much more pronounced spikes than Toothless or the Light Fury, or actually the Light Fury doesn't have any, but he has more pronounced spikes than Toothless. So that's a bit of fun to do, to try to make them nice and clean and have the shape flow quite nicely. Once I was happy with that, I went back to the face to spend a bit of time working on the eyes, as he has very sharp blue eyes. Had to make sure he had a bit of an eyebrow as well, that way he's got like a bit of character, a bit of sass. And then finally it was time for the wings. Now, thanks to Replicant, the wings are so easy to make. I'm sure you've seen in plenty of my previous Night Fury creations about how the wings have always been a big struggle because coloration, whereas this time round just the Batboy parts are enough Replicant to Batboys because they were painted pure black, and that's all I really needed. They were a little bit short though, so I did use a couple of the Phineas parts to try and just give it a little bit more of a point and kind of increase the sizing overall. And again, thanks to Replicant, they all appear as pure black and they flow together really nicely. And at last we have Thunder, the Nightlight from the 9 Realms. I'm really happy with this, and it's really cool to finally be making a Fury again, while it's still being quite a different, unique one. Now, the mouth, I'm still a little bit sad about the mouth. I really wish it was animating, but unfortunately it's got a bit of a weird bulbous lip design, which it kind of does have in the show, by the way. The show's a bit clearly lower budget compared to the previous shows, but hey, what can you do? So he does actually have a bit of a slightly chubby face, we'll say it. Nothing wrong with that, but it does mean that in Spore, it's a bit exaggerated, and again, the lack of animating mouth kind of makes it stick out a bit more. But aside from that, yes, like I said, very, very happy with the overall creature, and I like how it really stands out compared to the other Furies. How Thunder is clearly his own character. And then with all that said and done, we'll move on to the showcase. And as always, thank you all so much for watching, and a huge thanks to Clark for the wonderful showcase. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you again next time. Cheers.